The tag on the back of your shirt might simply say, Made in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small white rectangle, unassuming, maybe a bit scratchy. But if you were to, actually rip that supply chain apart layer by layer, you would find a story that spans the entire globe.
Oh, absolutely.
The cotton likely grew on a farm in Korea, or perhaps the black soils of Maharashtra. The buttons.
They probably came in a shipping container from a massive factory in Shenzhen, China.
And the machinery used to stitch that fabric was likely precision engineered in Germany. And the design, the actual blueprint of what that shirt looks like, was probably emailed from a glass high-rise in New York or San Francisco.
It's a logistical miracle.
It is, one we take for granted every time we get dressed.
Yeah.
It's also a chaotic, messy, and awfully fascinating web. Welcome to the world of globalization.
It really is the defining feature of our modern economy. It's the air we breathe, economically speaking. And you're right, it's not just about trading goods. It's not just, I sell you a shirt, you give me money. It's about how the entire production process, the actual making of things, has been sliced up, diced, and scattered across different countries to maximize efficiency.
Exactly. And today, we are doing something very special. This isn't just a casual chat about world economics.
No, not at all.
This is a full, comprehensive summary for UPSC aspirants, focused specifically by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. We are taking a deep dive into NCERT Class 10 Economics, Chapter 4, Globalization and the Indian Economy.
But we aren't just reading the chapter line by line. I mean, that would be boring.
It would.
Our mission today is to decode how production is organized, how India fits into this massive global puzzle, and most importantly for you, the learner, how to link these 10th grade concepts directly to high-level UPSC previous year questions, or PYQs.
That is the key. We are bridging that gap between the basics and the exam hall. Now, before we unravel the mystery of the World Trade Organization and the plight of the Indian toy maker, I have a humble request. If you find value in these deep dives, if they help you visualize these concepts, please subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PTP YouTube channel. It really helps us keep the lights on and the content flowing.
And for those of you who are capable, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support allows us to do the research required to create super useful content like this. It takes a lot of time to synthesize this material, and our patrons are the ones who make it possible.
A massive warm shout out to all our current supporters and patrons. You guys are the real MVPs. You make this content creation possible. Also, don't forget to hit that like button on the video right now and share your valuable comments below.
We do read them, and they really help the algorithm find other serious aspirants like you.
One last resource alert before we begin the analysis.
Go for it.
We have free notes with practice previous year questions available right now on our public Telegram channel. It's a great way to revise what you hear today.
And for the serious aspirants who want the royal treatment, we have the private Telegram library.
What's in there?
That gets you access to all videos in this series at once, plus organized premium notes. We're talking detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers the works.
So how do they join?
If you want in, just DM us on the public Telegram channel to join. Okay, business aside.
Let's unpack this beast called globalization.
Let's do it.
So Chapter 4 starts with a shift in perspective. It asks us to look at the market today versus the market of the past. Growing up, or maybe listening to our parents, the choices were pretty limited.
Oh, very limited.
I remember seeing mostly Ambassador and Fiat cars on Indian roads. Maybe a Maruti 800 if you were fancy.
Now it's Toyota, Hyundai, Ford, Volkswagen, everything is available.
Everything.
And it's not just cars. It's televisions, phones, fruit juices. The text makes a crucial point here. This wide-ranging choice of goods in our markets is a relatively recent phenomenon.
Right.
You just wouldn't have found this variety 2 decades ago.
So, the text says globalization isn't just about selling things abroad. It's about the integration of production and markets. But let's start with the engine of this whole process. Who is driving this change?
Well, the text points a finger directly at the MNC.
The multinational corporation.
Right. And for the exam, and just for general conceptual clarity, you need a precise definition. People often think an MNC is just a company that sells stuff to other countries.
Like if I make pickles in Delhi and mail them to London, am I an MNC?
No, not quite.
Okay, so what's the distinction?
An MNC is a company that owns or controls production in more than one nation. That word production is the differentiator. They aren't just trading, they are making. They set up offices and factories for production in regions where they can get cheap labor and other resources.
So they aren't just shipping boxes. They are actually putting down roots, pouring concrete, and hiring locals to make things.
Exactly. And we have to ask the logical question, why?
Why bother?
Why go through the massive headache of setting up a factory in Vietnam, a design studio in Italy, and an office in Bangalore? Why not just do it all in one place?
It's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah.
The money.
It's a cost-benefit game, pure and simple. They set up production where labor is cheap and resources are available.
Yeah.
The NCERT actually throws out a pretty staggering number here. It says that by spreading out production, an MNC can save 50 to 60% in costs.
50 to 60%. That is huge.
It's massive. That is the difference between being a market leader and going bankrupt.
That's so.
Well, if your competitor creates a global supply chain and drops their costs by half, and you're still making everything in a high-cost country, you are finished.
You can't compete.
You're done.
The text gives a classic case study to illustrate this. It talks about a large MNC producing industrial equipment. Let's break that down because it really illustrates the slicing up of the value chain.
It's a perfect example. So step 1, design. This company has research centers in the United States. Why? Because the U.S. has a high concentration of specialized talent, universities, and the intellectual property laws to protect those designs.
So that's where the high-value thinking happens.
Exactly, the brain power.
Okay, so the blueprint is made in the U.S. Then what?
Then the actual components, the nuts, bolts, screens, circuits, are manufactured in China.
Why China?
Because China has spent the last 40 years building the world's best infrastructure for manufacturing. They have the ports, the roads, and the cheap, skilled manufacturing capability. It's just unbeatable on that front.
So the parts are made in China. Do they assemble them there?
In this example, no. These components are then shipped to Mexico and Eastern Europe. Now ask yourself why those two locations specifically.
Well, looking at a map, Mexico is right next to the U.S., and Eastern Europe is right next to the Western European markets.
Precisely. It's about market proximity. You assemble the final product close to where the rich buyers are.
So you save on shipping.
You save on shipping the final bulky product across the ocean. You ship the dense parts from China, assemble them near the buyer, and truck them over the border. It's brilliant, really.
And finally, and this is the part we in India are very familiar with, the customer care.
Yes, the call centers. In this case study, they are located in Bangalore.
And the text is quite specific about why India is chosen for this.
It is. It lists two main advantages. First, India has highly skilled engineers who can understand the technical aspects of the industrial equipment.
Right.
So if a machine breaks, the person on the phone actually knows how it works.
Not just reading from a script.
Exactly. And second, India has a vast population of English-speaking youth who can provide customer support at a fraction of the wages you'd have to pay an American worker.
So the shirt label analogy I used at the start, it really does apply to everything. A tractor, a computer, a shirt, they are all made in the world.
Made in the world is the perfect phrase for it. And this complex web is what connects the economy of a town in China to a city in the U.S. to a tech park in Bangalore.
It's fascinating because it means the made in label is almost a lie. It's a simplification of a much more complex reality.
A huge simplification.
Now, moving from the why to the how.
Yeah.
The text outlines 4 specific methods MNCs use to enter a country like India. If you're writing an answer on foreign direct investment for UPSC, these are your 4 pillars.
Right. You can't just walk into a country and start selling. You need a strategy.
Let's walk through them. Method 1, joint production.
This is very common. An MNC partners with a local company that already exists. For the local company, this is usually a win-win situation, at least initially.
What do the locals get out of it? What's in it for them?
2 things. First, the MNC brings money, additional investment for new machines, faster production, maybe expanding the factory.
Let's capital.
And second, and maybe more importantly, they bring the latest technology. They bring production methods that the local company might not have had access to.
So it's a technology transfer. That makes sense. Then there's method 2, acquisition. This sounds a bit more aggressive, buying up the local guys.
It is, and truthfully, it's the most common route for huge MNCs because they have tremendous wealth.
Right.
Why build a factory from scratch? Buy land, get permits, hire people when you can just buy a factory that is already running?
The text uses the example of Cargill Foods,
Yeah.
a massive American MNC.
Yes, Cargill is a giant. They bought a smaller Indian company called Parak Foods.
Now, Parak Foods wasn't tiny, was it?
No, not at all. They had a large marketing network in various parts of India where their brand was well reputed. They had 4 oil refineries. They were a significant player.
And Cargill just bought them out.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Ah.
And the result, Cargill is now the largest producer of edible oil in India, making 5 million pouches daily.
Wow.
They shifted the control from Indian hands to American hands overnight. That's the power of acquisition.
Method 3 seems to be where the power dynamic gets really tricky. Placing orders.
Yes. This is distinct from the first two. In joint production and acquisition, the MNC owns the factory.
In this method, they don't own anything. This is typical in the garment, footwear, and sports equipment industries.
So how does it work then?
The MNC, think of a giant brand like Nike or Zara, develops a design. Then they place orders with small producers all over the world. They say, I need 10,000 jeans stitched exactly like this, delivered by this date.
So the small producer in Ludhiana or Tirupur is making the product, but they don't own the brand.
Correct. And because the MNC is so big and the producers are so small and numerous, the MNC holds all the cards.
They call all the shots.
All of them. They determine the price, they determine the quality, they set the delivery schedule, and they even dictate labor conditions.
And the small producer, what power do they have?
They have almost no bargaining power. If they say, I need more money, the MNC just says, okay, we'll go to the next factory down the road or we'll go to Bangladesh. It puts tremendous pressure on the small guys.
Right. And finally, method 4, which is a mix of the others but worth noting as a specific success story in the text, the Ford Motors example. Yes, this is the classic foreign direct investment story. Ford came to Chennai in 1995. But they didn't come alone. They collaborated with Mahindra and Mahindra, a major Indian manufacturer of Jeeps and trucks.
So that started as a joint production.
Exactly. They spent, 1,700 crore to set up a massive plant. But here's the nuance for the exam. This wasn't just to sell Fords to Indians.
Right, because by 2004, they were selling 27,000 cars in the Indian markets. But they were exporting exactly as many, almost 24,000 cars, from India to South Africa, Mexico, and Brazil.
And that connects back to our production across countries theme. That Chennai plant isn't just serving Chennai, it's a global hub. Furthermore, the text mentions they export components to other Ford plants globally. So the Chennai plant is just one node in Ford's global web. It integrates India into the global supply chain of automobiles.
So we've got the engine, the MNCs, and we know how they operate. But globalization didn't just happen by magic. There were enablers.
You can't have a global supply chain if you can't talk to the factory or ship the goods. The text highlights 2 major factors: technology and liberalization.
Let's start with technology. It's easy to say technology improved, but for a UPSC answer, we need to be specific.
Right.
The text highlights 2 distinct technological revolutions: transportation and communication.
Under transportation, they focus on something that looks pretty boring but changed the world: the container.
The humble shipping container. It's hard to overstate how important this is. Before containers, if you wanted to ship goods, you had to load sacks, barrels, and crates individually.
One by one.
One by one, you'd load them onto a truck, unload them at the port, load them onto the ship, unload them at the destination. It was slow, expensive, and things got stolen or broken constantly.
And the container changed all that.
Completely. Now, you load a standard metal box at the factory. That same box goes onto a truck, gets lifted by a crane onto a ship, gets taken off, put on a train, without anyone ever touching the goods inside.
The text mentions this led to a huge reduction in port handling costs and increased speed.
Huge reduction. It's the reason you can buy a plastic toy from China for 50 rupees in a Delhi market. If you had to pay the old shipping rates, that toy would cost 500 rupees. The transport cost per unit became negligible.
And then the second factor, IT and communication, the internet.
This is the death of distance. The text gives a great example of a magazine published for a London audience. The text is sent by email to Delhi. The designers in Delhi format it. They use telecommunication facilities to talk to the London office in real time.
And once it's designed,
The printing happens in Delhi, then the magazines are flown to London, and payment, instant electronic transfer from a London bank to a Delhi bank.
this allows for the trade of services, not just goods.
Exactly. This is the backbone of India's BPO and IT sector. Without satellite communication and the internet, The call center in Bangalore simply couldn't exist.
Okay, so technology made globalization possible. It provided the hardware,
Mm-hmm.
but policy made it legal. This brings us to the second enabler, liberalization.
Right. To understand liberalization, you have to understand what came before it. The trade barrier.
The text uses the example of the Chinese toy invasion to
Sure.
explain this. Let's play this out. Suppose the Indian government wants to protect Indian toy makers.
Okay.
They see cheap Chinese toys coming in and killing the local industry. So they put a tax on imports.
That tax is a barrier. Let's say a Chinese toy costs 100 rupees. The government adds a 100% tax. Now it costs 200 rupees.
So the Indian consumer, looking for a bargain, sees the Indian toy at 150 and the Chinese toy at 200.
They switch back to the Indian toy. Exactly. The Indian industry is protected. This was India's strategy for decades after independence.
But why did we do that? Why not just have open markets from 1947?
Because in the 1950s and 60s, India's industries were just barely coming up. We were babies in the industrial world.
Okay.
If we had allowed free trade then, established foreign companies who had been doing this for a century would have crushed our nascent industries. We wouldn't have had a Tata or a Mahindra today.
So we were selective.
Very. We only allowed essential imports, machinery, fertilizer, petroleum, things we absolutely needed.
But then came 1991, the big U-turn.
The new economic policy. The government, supported by international organizations like the WTO, decided that the time for protection was over.
Yeah, the change of heart.
They felt that protection was making Indian producers lazy, for lack of a better word. Without competition, they weren't improving quality.
So the rationale was that competition would force them to improve.
Yes, they believed that if Indian producers had to compete with global brands, they would be forced to upgrade their technology and quality.
So liberalization is defined as removing these barriers or restrictions set by the government, making decisions freely about what to export and import.
Precisely. Liberalization comes from liberty, freedom. Freedom for businesses to decide what to import, what to export, without the government standing at the gate saying no.
And this is where we need to pause and bring in the heavy artillery, the UPSC PYQs.
Let's do it.
Because this 1991 shift is a recurring theme in the civil services exam. You can't just know the definition. You need to know how to critique it.
Absolutely. The exam demands analysis, not just memorization.
Let's look at UPSC Mains 2016 General Studies Paper 2, Question 13. I'll read it out. Has the Indian governmental system responded adequately to the demands of liberalization, privatization, and globalization started in 1991? What can the government do to be responsive to this important change?
This is a beautiful question because it asks for an evaluation. It asks, did we do a good job?
Right.
You can't just say, yes, it was great, or no, it was terrible. You have to look at the nuance.
So based on the NCERT text we've covered so far, how do we structure an answer to this?
Well, the yes part, the adequacy is clear from the growth stats. The government responded by removing barriers, which allowed capital and technology to flow in. We saw the rise of the IT sector, the auto sector, like Ford in Chennai. That was an adequate response to the demand for economic growth and modernization. We integrated with the world.
But the question asks if the system responded adequately. That implies we need to look for where it failed.
Exactly, and that implies looking at the gaps. As we will see later in the impact section of this deep dive, the government's response regarding fair globalization and labor laws is where the critique lies.
I see.
The system facilitated the MNCs, it rolled out the red carpet for Ford, but did it protect the small producer in Ludhiana? Did it protect the garment worker from flexible labor laws?
The NCERT suggests no, it didn't.
Right. So a good UPSC answer would use the Ford example as a success of policy, but contrast it with the garment worker struggle as a failure of responsiveness to social welfare.
So you argue that the government was responsive to capital, but perhaps less responsive to labor.
That is a crucial distinction. It's not just about GDP, it's about the human cost.
Exactly.
And let's bring in a future-looking question to add even more depth. Look at the mock question for 2025 GS Paper 2, Question 10. With the waning of globalization, post-Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. Elucidate.
Waning globalization. That's the opposite of what this chapter teaches.
It is.
The chapter is all about increasing integration.
It is. The NCERT was written when globalization was at its peak optimism, the era of rapid integration, interconnectedness. But this question asks you to contrast that textbook view with reality.
So you have to argue that.
You have to argue that while the NCERT describes the mechanism of integration MNCs, technology, the current geopolitical reality involves nations turning inward.
You mean things like trade wars?
Exactly. Trade wars between the US and China, banning apps, slogans like Make in India or America First. These are all examples of sovereign nationalism.
So countries are rebuilding the very barriers that 1991 took down.
Precisely. So for the exam, you use the NCERT concepts, MNC, supply chains, to explain what is being dismantled or protected by this new sovereign nationalism.
You show the examiner you understand the mechanic from the insert and the context from current affairs.
That's how you score big marks.
Okay, moving on to the referee of this global game. We've talked about the players, the MNCs, and the rules. Liberalization. Now let's talk about the umpire, the World Trade Organization, or WTO.
The watchdog. The text describes the goal of the WTO quite simply: to liberalize international trade and establish rules that everyone obeys.
Okay.
It started at the initiative of developed countries. As of 2016, it had about 165 members.
But here comes the drama. The NCERT and the UPSC loves to critique the WTO. Ideally, it's a level playing field where everyone follows the same rules. But is it?
Absolutely not, according to the source. The text is very explicit here. It says developed countries, like the U.S., have unfairly retained trade barriers while forcing developing countries like India to remove them.
It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
And the classic example provided is cotton.
This is a goldmine for an exam answer. It illustrates the hypocrisy perfectly. In the U.S., the government gives massive sums of money subsidies to their cotton farmers.
Why do they do that?
To keep the farmers happy and in business, politically. But the economic effect is distortion. Because the U.S. farmer gets a huge check from the government, they can afford to sell their cotton on the global market at artificially low prices.
Even below their own cost of production sometimes.
Sometimes, yes. They dump this cheap cotton on the global market.
And what does that do to our farmers?
Well, look at the farmer in a developing country like India. They don't get those massive subsidies. They have to sell at a price that covers their costs. But they can't compete with the artificially cheap U.S. cotton.
They lose customers.
I go out of business.
So the debate is, developing countries are saying, hey, WTO, we reduced our barriers because you told us to. We opened our markets. But the U.S. didn't stop their subsidies. Is this free and fair trade?
It's a rigged game. And this links directly to UPSC Maine's 2014 GS Paper 2, question 17. The question asks about the Doha round of negotiations seeming doomed due to differences between the developed and the developing countries.
And the cotton subsidy story is the evidence.
It is the perfect evidence. When you answer that question, you don't just speak in abstract terms about disagreements.
Right.
You cite the cotton example from the NCERT. You explain that the difference mentioned in the question is exactly this hypocrisy regarding subsidies and market access. You tell the examiner, I know exactly why they are fighting.
That turns a generic answer into a specific high-scoring one. Okay, let's get to the scoreboard. Who won and who lost? We've seen the mechanism. Now let's look at the result. Section 5. The impact of globalization in India. Let's start with the winners.
The most obvious winner is the consumer. Specifically, the text says, the well-off urban consumer.
That's us mostly, and probably most of our listeners.
Likely. For us, globalization has been a blessing. Greater choice, improved quality, lower prices.
Totally. If you want a phone, you have 20 brands. If you want a car, you have models from every continent.
The standard of living for the urban middle and upper class has undeniably gone up. We have access to the world's best goods.
Then there are the top Indian companies. Globalization didn't just crush everyone. It forced the big players to adapt.
Right. The fear was that foreign companies would wipe out Indian companies, but for the biggest ones, the opposite happened. Competition forced them to invest in new technology to survive. They improved their production standards.
The text mentions some heavy hitters. Tata Motors and automobiles, Infosys and IT, Ranbaxy and medicines, Asian paints.
Sundaram fasteners for nuts and bolts. And notice the progression. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Some became MNCs themselves.
Oh, right.
Tata Motors bought Jaguar Land Rover. Asian Paints operates in multiple countries. They went out and acquired companies abroad. They became the sharks.
And we can't forget the service sector.
The boom in IT is the headline, of course, but the text mentions it's also data entry, accounting, administrative tasks.
Right.
New jobs were created in banking, fast food chains, and cell phone sales. These are the success stories. If you have an education and skills, globalization opened doors for you.
But there is a dark side. Section 6. The losers and the labor question.
This is where the NCERT gets very real. It doesn't sugarcoat the damage.
No, it doesn't. It talks about the crisis of small producers.
We're talking about industries like batteries, capacitors, plastics, toys, dairy products.
These are sectors often run by small families or small groups. They operate on thin margins. When import barriers fell, cheap foreign goods flooded the market.
Take the battery manufacturer.
A small battery manufacturer in a town near Delhi used to supply the local market. Suddenly, better, cheaper batteries from Japan or China are available.
And he can't compete.
He can't compete with the scale of a Chinese giant. He doesn't have the technology.
That's the consequence.
Many units close down. And here is the kicker. Small industries employ the largest number of workers in India after agriculture.
So when these units close,
It's not just a business failing, it's a social crisis. Massive job losses. This is the inequality aspect of globalization.
and even for those who have jobs, the nature of work has changed. The text talks about labor law flexibility. That sounds like a good thing. Flexibility is usually good, right?
In this context, it's a euphemism. It's a fancy way of saying job insecurity.
How so?
MNCs push the government for flexible laws. Ideally, this means they want the right to hire and fire based on seasonal demand. They don't want to carry the cost of workers when business is slow.
So no permanent jobs, no benefits, no pension.
Exactly. The text uses the garment industry as a vivid case study. Large MNCs in the US and Europe, the brands we wear, demand the lowest possible prices from Indian exporters.
So the Indian exporter is squeezed. They have to cut costs to get the contract.
Mhm.
They can't cut the cost of fabric or buttons. Those are global prices. They can't cut the electricity bill. So where do they cut?
They cut labor.
Of course.
They stop hiring permanent workers. They hire workers only when they have orders. They pay very low wages. They demand overtime, sometimes 12-hour shifts, without proper pay.
The text has a poignant line about this. It says, globalization created paid work for women, but they are denied a fair share of the benefits.
That is the crux of the argument. They have a job, yes, but it's a job without security, without dignity, and with barely enough pay to survive.
The benefits went elsewhere.
The benefits of globalization went to the MNC and the consumer, not the worker.
And this connects to UPSC Mains 2016, GS Paper 1, Question 10. Do you think that globalization results in only an aggressive consumer culture? Justify your answer.
That's a tricky one. The word only is the trap.
Right. How do you handle it?
You have to argue both sides, but the aggressive consumer culture part is strongly supported by the NCERT's description of well-off buyers driving the market. Advertisements tell you to buy the global lifestyle: new phone, new clothes, fast food.
Meanwhile, the small producer and the garment worker are invisible.
Exactly. They aren't treated as citizens or even consumers in this story. They are just raw material to be used and discarded to keep prices low.
So globalization fuels consumption for the rich by squeezing the poor. That is your justification.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
So we have winners, we have losers. The text doesn't just leave us depressed, it offers a roadmap. Section 7, the path forward, fair globalization.
Fair globalization. That is the key term the chapter ends with. It's the idea that globalization creates opportunities for all, not just the educated and the wealthy.
What can the government actually do? Because earlier we asked if they were responsive. What should they do to be responsive?
The NCERT prescribes a few specific policy steps. Number 1, labor laws. The government must ensure they are implemented properly so workers get their rights.
Not just on paper.
Or not just on paper, but in reality, stop the exploitation in the garment factories.
Number 2, support small producers.
Yes. You can't just throw them to the wolves. Give them access to cheaper credit, technology updates, and better infrastructure. Help them improve their performance before throwing them into the ring with the heavyweights.
And interestingly, the text suggests a reversal of liberalization, if necessary.
It does. This is radical. It says the government can use trade and investment barriers if necessary to protect domestic interests.
Wow.
It says we open the door, but we can close it a little bit if it's hurting our people. It's not a one-way street.
And finally, the international angle, negotiating at the WTO.
India needs to stop being a passive rule taker. India needs to align with other developing countries. If India stands alone, the US or EU might bully them.
But together.
But if India, Brazil, South Africa, and others stand together, they can fight the domination of developed nations and demand fairer rules like ending those cotton subsidies we talked about.
The text also mentions the role of people campaigns and organizations. It's not just up to the politicians.
Right. Public pressure matters. The text mentions that massive campaigns by people's organizations have influenced WTO decisions in the past. We have a voice.
I want to link this to one more PYQ before we wrap up. UPSC Mains 2025, GS Paper 1, Question 19. Achieving sustainable growth with emphasis on environmental protection could come into conflict with poor people's needs in a country like India.
This is a synthesis question. It combines economics with environment and society. The NCERT focuses on economic sustainability, but think about the small producer we discussed.
How do they fit into environmental protection?
Often, global standards, environmental standards, quality standards are set by the rich countries. They say, to sell to us, your factory must be carbon neutral, or your packaging must be biodegradable.
That sounds good for the planet.
It is good for the planet. But for the small battery maker in India who is already struggling to survive, that extra cost of a filter or biodegradable plastic might be the final nail in the coffin.
I see. So the conflict is, do we save the environment or do we save the poor man's job?
Exactly. So fair globalization also means ensuring that global standards don't become just another barrier to exclude the poor. We need to help the poor producers meet those standards, not just ban them for failing. The conflict mentioned in the question is real. The need for a job often clashes with the need for global compliance.
Wow. We have really connected the dots here. We started with the shirt label and ended with the geopolitical strategy of the Global South and the ethics of environmentalism.
That's the power of this subject. It's not just numbers, it's people's lives.
Let's summarize what we've covered today. Globalization is a mixed bag.
It is.
It's great for the IT engineer in Bangalore and the car buyer in Delhi. It's tough for the battery maker and the garment worker.
It's driven by MNCs hunting for profit, fueled by technology that killed distance, and permitted by liberalization policies that open the doors.
And the battleground for the future is the WTO, where the goal is to shift from free trade, which favors the strong, to fair trade, which protects the weak.
Precisely.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over. The NCERT asks us to imagine the world 20 years from now. But let's look at that 2025 question again, the one about sovereign nationalism. Here is the provocative thought. We assumed globalization was a one-way street, that the world would just get more and more connected. But if nations keep turning inward, if the US, China, and Europe keep building walls instead of bridges, will we see a deglobalization?
And if we do, what happens to that web of production? Can you actually untangle it?
Can you build a Ford entirely in one country anymore? Can you make a smartphone with parts from only one nation?
Or is the web so tangled that trying to cut it will just crash the whole system?
That is a scary and fascinating thought. The messy web might be the only thing holding the piece together. If we can't trade, maybe we fight.
Indeed. It raises the stakes significantly.
Listeners, if this deep dive helped you connect the dots between your textbook and the real world, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP. We are here to make your prep smarter, not harder.
And if you can, support us on Patreon. It keeps the lights on and the content flowing. We really appreciate it.
Don't forget, grab those free notes and PYQs on the public Telegram channel. And for the serious aspirants who want the edge, the private Telegram library awaits with the premium notes and model answers. Just DM us to join.
A massive thank you to our supporters. You are the reason we can do this.
Like, comment, share. We'll see you in the next deep dive.
Keep learning.